Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to another episode on the channel. Today, I'm going to be doing more of an explanation rather than a lot of coding. And the reason is we're going to be talking about Vuex, and we're going to be going over exactly when to use it, why to use it, and how to use it. Vuex is a centralized state management for Vue.js. So basically, what that means is that when your components are getting too big, when you're scaling up, so like you don't have 10, 12, 15 components, you already have 20 or more and more and more, and even less. Like there is a saying, like you know when you need it. It's like when you need glasses, and it's over in one of the slides. But basically, as you grow your application, you start seeing the need for it, and basically each component has its own data flow, so each component has data, each component has methods where you can mutate this data, you can change this data, and then each component has the view. But what happens when you have a tree of components and then you need the grandchild of the sibling to be able to trigger something on the other side to a distant cousin or something like that? It starts getting very tricky because basically with props, you can move up, you can emit events, and you can update the data down. But it starts becoming very tricky because you can think about it like as a tree, and then you're trying to go from the bottom all the way to the top, and then you're trying to go to the bottom again to know that this state just changed. So basically what Vuex is Vuex is a state management pattern and library for Vue.js. It serves as a centralized store for all components in an application. So basically, it's a central base for your data. Like that's going to handle all your data, more like a database for your application. You don't put everything inside of your code. You actually have a database that handles all your data. So it's very similar. It has strict rules ensuring that the state can only be changed in a certain way. And the reason for that is to avoid any memory leaks, and then be able to debug it better, and then at the same time to know that the source of truth is changing without it being triggered by something else. So I'll go over that in a minute. It integrates with Vue's official DevTools extension, and then it provides basically tools for you to be able to program them, and then you can do things like time travel, you can go back on mutations, so you can see exactly how the data and how your components were at a certain state in the application. And that really helps when you have a big application and you're trying to accomplish something. It's very useful in the sense that you can see as every little thing you clicked, what happened, how was the data there at that point, what happened when I click here. You can actually go back to that specific point when something broke. So it really makes it easy when you're trying to debug or work with something, a big feature. And it's inspired on Flux, Redux, and the Elm structure. So basically, folks at Facebook realize, hey, this right here is getting pretty big. Like the one store we have is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's just gonna get bigger. So they didn't come up with it, but they basically made Redux so that it follows the Flux structure again. So basically it helps them to manage the data better, and that way you don't have to do it in the components. So like the whole thing is you're trying to only have code in your components, and then have data where data goes inside of its own say like component structure. But it's not really a component, it's more of a centralized system that you can call from all your components. This is how a single component works. So you have view, actions, and state, and this is what I was talking about. It's a one-way data flow. It still works, for a lot of things, but like I said, it starts getting out of control when you are keep adding and adding data, and then you need the data somewhere else, and that somewhere else is not a parent, is not say like a sibling. It's very far, so say that you have one component, and then that component is the grandchild of another component, and that other grandparent has like a brother, or something else that has like a great grandchild, and then you're trying from that great grandchild, which is all the way here on that tree, to go all the way over here. You just can't do it. And if you do it, it's going to be hard for you to just manage all those interactions. So the state, the source of truth that drives our app. The view is our declarative mapping of the state. The actions, the possible ways that the state could change in reaction to user inputs from the view. So basically that's how a regular component works. You have methods, you have a state, and then you have a view. Your methods is how you make changes to that state, the data in this case. And the view obviously represents what you're doing and how the data is through B model or getters or computed properties or watchers. This is more or less how your regular Vue app is going to look. So you have the data, that's what I was talking about, that's your state. You have a template, which is your view, and then you have methods, and in this case it's just an incrementer, it's just a counter. When you click on it, it's just going to keep incrementing, and there is no click in here. But if you were to add a click in here, say increment, every time you click on this will start incrementing. So that's how you change the data from the methods, and then you have it on the view. But say you wanted to change this counter for some reason from somewhere else, if it's not the parent, if it's a child or a grandchild, it starts becoming more and harder. This is a representation of how Vuex works, and all of this is from the documentation. I just try to make it shorter in order for us to understand it a little better. So to save you, the time to go through the entire documentation and not exactly understanding what it is, this will give you a better idea, so that when you are looking at the documentation, you already know, oh, this is what this is about, this is what that is about. So basically, usually what you have, obviously, you start with the components. The components will dispatch, and they will dispatch an action. Basically, the action, what it is like your methods. This action is the one that's going to interact with the server. So right here, you see how these actions are interacting with the backend API. Once they get the data back, they're going to commit mutations. The mutations are the ones that are going to integrate with the dev tools, and that's how through the console in your browser, you know exactly what's being changed, and you can go back, one step or two steps, or you can time travel with it. Those mutations are going to mutate the state, so that instead of just straight from the methods you're changing the state, you're going through mutations. Mutations are then changing the state. The state then renders back into the component. So it's a little bit more, but honestly, once you get used to it, it's not really a lot. It's more overhead in the beginning, but at the same time, it gives you more freedom once you have 200 components or even less, like 50. Once it starts getting out of control, and basically you're keeping your components with just the code, just what you need, and it's more of a single responsibility component without it being a monster, like a God component, where it handles everything. And you're actually able to just break them down into smaller components because you have a centralized state of truth, a centralized store that allows you to just share the data like that. So again, when should I use it? Flux libraries are like glasses. You'll know when you need them, and that's Dan Abramov, the author of Redux. So basically, you will know when you need it. Basically, when you're in that spot where you're saying, you know what, I'm admitting too much stuff, and it's just hard to keep, centralized store very hard, and your store is already like 100 lines or even less. Whenever you feel like, okay, this is getting out of control, you need something like Vuex. That's going to save you a ton of time, and it's going to save you a ton of headaches, and it's going to allow you to debug better, like I said. So a little bit of an overview on Vuex. Vuex stores are reactive. When Vue components retrieve state from it, they will reactively and efficiently update if the stored state changes. So it integrates with Vue. Like whatever you do in the Vuex store, it's going to integrate right into Vue. You're more or less able to use it like a V model. Not really, but you'll use it more, and we'll get into that. But they're basically reactive. You cannot directly mutate the store state. The only way to change a store state is by explicitly committing mutations. So you cannot just mutate the state from anywhere. Basically from the grandchild, again, to go with that same example, you can just change the data from the Vuex store. You can't do that. You have to commit. You have to follow a process, and that will allow that. That's basically because first, to avoid memory leaks, and then second, to make it so that it's better for debugging. So it just works a lot better. This ensures every state change leaves a trackable record and enables tooling that helps us better understand our application. So all in all is that you're trying to make your application easier to understand, easier to work with by your team, by your peers, by yourself, so that when you go back to it, you add features or you change stuff, it's easier for you to do it and for everybody else. So again, let's go into the state. Vuex uses a single state tree, so it's a single big object that serves as a single source of truth. This also means usually you will have only one store for each application. So you have one store for your entire application. A single state tree makes it straightforward to locate a specific piece of state and allows us to easily take snapshots of the current app state for debugging purposes. You can still split the objects into modules. Data is stored just like in a Vue component. So it starts getting big. I honestly, when I start working with Vuex, I start straight with modules. And basically what modules allow you to do, and we'll go over that in a little bit, it's basically they allow you to just chunk your state, so each little single piece of module represents whatever you're trying to do. So if you have a shopping, for example, a shopping cart, you're trying to build that SPA with a shopping cart through an SPA, you can have a module that is, for example, the shopping cart itself. So whatever is in the shopping cart. You can have another module that's the checkout module. So that handles all the checkout interactions and whatever is within the checkout. You can have another module for the products, so that way you can get products and you can handle that from every single different independent module, so that it's easier for you. It doesn't become a 400-line monster file. It stays within a manageable state, so that it's easier for everybody to just follow and know exactly what's going on. And how do we use the state in the component? So we need to add this store. Let me go back. We need to add this store right here. So basically inside your Vue instance, you add this store, and like you already have Vuex through the entire application. You can already use it, and this makes it very convenient. And as you see over here inside of your component, then you can access the store state count. Usually you want to do this a little bit different, but this is just a basic example. So within your component, which is registered over here, you see components counter. You can just have this little count that's coming straight from Vuex. All right, so this is where instead of using this store state count, you will use a MapState. So basically what that is, it's a method that allows you to easily add your state to a component so that you don't start doing this over and over. This store state count, this store state products, this store state cart, this store state shopping, so it starts becoming very repetitive, and that becomes hard for you to manage. You if you need to change one, you have to go and change them all, and it's just easier to use a map state. So Vuex gives you these methods that allow you to interact with the components, and then it makes it easier for you to just manage your application. So when a component needs to make use of multiple store states, properties, or getters, declaring all these computed properties can get repetitive and verbose. You can still use state inside the component. So you can still use the state for the component. If the component has a state that is just going to be for that specific component, then obviously you're not going to just be adding everything in Vuex. You add in Vuex what you're going to be sharing between components. Every component can still have its own state, that it needs. Like, for example, if the component is active and you want to display it when it's active, then that can have its own, that can be within the component data and not necessarily in Vuex.